Hello everyone, welcome back. We are still working on Chaos Chapter 2. Chapter 2 is called An Aura of Danger, and this next little section is called In California, Everybody Has a Tan. All right, let's get started. All right, I found it difficult to sort through the stories coming out of the house on Cielo Drive. Picture a spider web so dense with connections and tendrils that it looks like a solid sheet of fabric. That's what I felt I was working with. The Hollywood cliques that had seemed at the start so discreet and isolated were all mixed up with one another, much more than Bugliosi had made it appear. Plus, then and now, people weren't always willing to be upfront about who they hung out with. Tate was right to be wary of Frykowski, assuming she had been. He'd fallen in with a dangerous crowd. Many of the primitive people that Kazanowski met had extensive rap sheets, and their names kept coming up when people mentioned the gravest excesses of Cielo Drive. Pick Dawson, who'd threatened Frykowski's life and been thrown out of Polanski's party, had been the subject of Interpol surveillance for drug smuggling as early as 1965. The young son of a diplomat, he'd become part of the Polanski crowd through his friendship with Cass Elliot, one of the singers in the popular 60s group, the Mamas and the Papas. Now, I've read some theories that all of the Mamas and the Papas were CIA assets. I don't know. Is it conspiracy theory? Maybe. Is there proof? I don't know. I can link an article, though, if you guys are interested in that. I don't know much about them other than I read an article saying that they were part of this, that time period where in all those little canyons, Benedict Canyon, Topanga Canyon. There's all these little canyons in LA that some weird stuff happened. There's actually a book called, oh gosh, I'm going to butcher it. It's like something weird. Okay, I'm just going to post it here because I don't remember what it's called. But weird stuff happened in those canyons in the 60s. Anyways, back on track. Like most of the men in the troubled singer's life, he'd used her for money and connections. Elliot's biographers would later write that her infamous 1966 London arrest, she'd been caught stealing hotel towels and a key. What? Again, these rich and famous people, why are you stealing towels and a key? It's not like a hotel towels or anything. They're crappy, let's be honest. It was actually a ruse to force her to share information about Dawson's drug smuggling operations. Dawson's colleagues in the drug business, Billy Doyle and Tom Harrigan, also wormed their way into Polanski's circle through Mama Cass. So we are going to get to the CIA stuff, guys, I promise. I know it may be starting out slowly, but the CIA is everything. This whole book, that's the whole point of it. It's interesting because my copy of this book, which I believe is the first edition, or the first run of it, just says Chaos, the Truth Behind the Manson Murders. But in later printings of it, it is not called that. It's called Chaos, Charles Manson, the CIA, and the Secret History of the 60s. So I know this book has turned off many in our little group, but I'm kind of sad that it has, because it's not really, of course it's about what happened, but it's really about the why and the possibility of the CIA being involved. And I don't know if any of you have ever known Ted Kaczynski. I'm not going to say what they call him because certain words get you in trouble on YouTube, but famous for doing very dark, devious things. But he was also in some crazy Harvard CIA program. And he went to Harvard when he was 16 years old. And I think they just target these, it's my opinion, I guess, people that don't have much good going on in their life, let's just say. So a 16-year-old at Harvard was kind of socially awkward. And they put him through this program, and some say it was MK Ultra. It was some kind of mind control experiments anyways. And he went on to do horrific things, which, spoiler, we're going to get some some hints of that as well in this book. So I hope you all will stick around and hope the rest will come back, because it's really not about the goriness of what happened. It's about why it happened, how it was allowed to happen, and was there more to it? I believe yes. All right, man, I'm off track again. Okay, according to police reports, Dawson, Doyle, and Harrigan, all 27, and all romantically involved with Elliot. Man, I don't know if it's just the times, but everyone's just sleeping with everyone. I do not get it. They were joined by a fourth partner, Uncle Charles Taycott. There's a lot of Charles and Charlies in this story, so hopefully we can keep them all straight. He was a New Yorker who was more than a decade older. A former Marine, the 6'6" strong man was renowned for his prowess with knives. He was rumored to have maintained ties to military intelligence, and he'd been selling drugs in Los Angeles since his arrival in the mid-1950s. Curiously, despite their many years of drug peddling and several drug arrests among them, only Doyle had ever been convicted of a crime. And his conviction was later overturned and changed to an acquittal on his record. You'll start to notice this about Manson too. Like, he weasels out of a lot of stuff, and it's like, why? So start to pay attention to that, because it's going to become a theme. Like Charles Manson, the four men seemed to have little fear of law enforcement. Once again, someone letting them off the hook? And if so, why? Helter Skelter paid only passing attention to these guys. They were among the few figures in the book who were given pseudonyms. Although Bugliosi noted Pick Dawson's death threat against Frykowski, he omitted an even more disturbing incident, one that makes a revenge motive much more plausible, and that reveals the extent to which the victims were mixed up in the seedier side of the counterculture. As the story goes, at some point in the months before the murders, the residents of Cielo threw one of their endless parties, with Frykowski and Sebring leading the charge. Billy Doyle showed up, and in the spirit of the times, drank, smoked, and snorted himself to unconsciousness. Frykowski and Sebring, maybe Witold Kasanowski too, wanted to get even with Doyle for something. Some say he'd sold them some bad drugs. So before a crowd of onlookers, this gets a little graphic, I'm trying to censor it a bit, they lowered Doyle's pants, flogged him, and assaulted him in the worst way you can imagine. This has become the kind of apocrypha that Manson conspiracy theorists can't get enough of. It's the same incident referenced in Barney Hoskins' Waiting for the Sun. Now, I have not read that book. I don't know if any of you have. The book I showed Bugliosi that day after our lunch. The story feels almost mythological in its ugliness and in the extent to which its most basic details, who, what, when, where, and why, are in flux. There are differing accounts of the where and the when of the incident as well. Candace Bergen, in an interview with the LAPD a few weeks after the murders, said that it was an assault. Think of a word that starts with R that is a synonym there. Most likely at Sebring's place or at his friend John Phillips, also of the Mamas and the Papas. Now, Candace Bergen, I only knew her from that show when I was younger called Murphy Brown, but apparently maybe that'll make some of you laugh, I don't know. But she was Terry Melcher's girlfriend, and they lived in that house at Cielo Drive prior to Sharon Tate and Roman Polanski living there. Dennis Hopper told the LA Free Press that it was at the Cielo house that the assault happened. He described it as a mass whipping of a dealer from Sunset Strip who'd given them bad dope. Ed Sanders in The Family, that's another book called The Family, reports that Doyle was whipped and video buggered. Which, I guess if you're a fan of British stuff, you'll know what buggered means in that context. And the location varies depending on which edition of the book you're looking at. So what really happened? I hesitated to report on this in 1999. It felt like another lurid departure for Manson, and it's not as if my headline afforded me time to explore every strange byway, which is why it took him 20 years to get this all compiled. But it bothered me that Bugliosi had left this out, and that so many people close to the victims regarded it as a flashpoint in the case. Well, yeah, if there's an alternative theory, like some revenge aspect that someone could have, committed these crimes because they were humiliated in front of everyone and wanted to, get back at them. It's definitely an angle probably worth looking at, right? So what really happened? It was another instance of the resilience of the live freaky, die freaky mindset. Plus, even if Pick Dawson, Billy Doyle, and the other dealers hadn't murdered anyone, they could still be behind the crimes or adjacent to them. If I could connect them to Manson, for instance, couldn't they have contracted him for the murders? I don't see Manson as a contract killer, but I guess it's possible. And if they were selling a lot of drugs to anyone who died at the Tate household, might there have been some kind of cover-up at work? So down I went, and I think he's talking about down a rabbit hole. Thanks to Kasanowski and a few others who spoke with the LAPD, detectives were quickly suspicious of Doyle and his companions after the murders. And Doyle himself was getting around quite a bit at the time. He was back and forth between LA, Jamaica, and his native Toronto. It was in this last city that police caught up to him in late August. I wouldn't get a transcript of the LAPD's interview until many years into my investigation. So, years in. Again, O'Neill was on this for 20 years. It's worth including here because it gives his side to the story. And Doyle is quotable. In short, he told the LAPD Lieutenant Earl Deemer that he didn't remember being assaulted, but he couldn't be sure. I would think that'd be pretty memorable if you had been assaulted in front of lots of people. However, if you are on drugs and don't recall, that is definitely also a possibility. But maybe he's just embarrassed and doesn't want to admit it. It's hard to say. He recalled going over to see Frykowski at the Cielo house on the night in question, sometime in early July. Frykowski, thinking it would be a funny prank, slipped some mescaline into his champagne. Folger and Kasanowski were there too. It was out at the swimming pool, Doyle told Deemer, and there were 2 cases of champagne by the pool. And apparently, Frykowski put some in my drink. Wouldn't you consider that poisoning? It's certainly a crime to give someone a drug unknowingly. I mean, he's dead at this point, so it doesn't really matter, but still, these people do have some interesting extracurricular activities, let's say. He wanted something to bring him down, and Frykowski was happy to oblige, producing some pills that he said belonged to Sharon Tate. Doyle swallowed about 8 of them. I'm sorry, but 8 of any pill, Tylenol, can really do some damage. And soon enough, as Frykowski started to laugh at him, he realized that the pills were something else entirely, and that he was dealing with some wild people. They were crazier than hell. I didn't realize they were so crazy. I'm using the word crazy, I mean drug-induced crazy. In California, everybody has a tan. Now, if people don't have a tan, they look a little different. You can see things in their faces that a tan covers up. They were all tan and looked healthy. They looked very straight to me when I first got there. And I don't remember much more than that. So it sounds like he wasn't really an open book, this Doyle guy. His observation about California, where everybody has a tan, reminded me of Kasanowski's remark. It was impossible back then to separate geniuses from charlatans. Everyone blended in, which is why the Manson family, seemed to be able to hobnob with all these celebrities. Seems like they had a lot of the same habits, to be honest. Of course, by most reckonings, Doyle himself would count as one of the charlatans. He admitted that he was a naturally paranoid person. In recent months, he'd developed a coke habit, which only exacerbated the paranoia. Convinced that someone somewhere was out to get him, he started to carry again. It didn't help that he often bragged about how much cocaine he had, especially when there were women around. That day, higher and higher on drugs that he could even name, Doyle became convinced that Frykowski meant to harm him. So he pulled out his gun and pointed it at him, threatening to kill him. Now, if someone ends up dead and there's someone who has threatened them recently, one might think that that's something that the police would investigate, or a person of interest at least. Frykowski, the bigger man and the more sober too, if only by a hair, wrestled the gun from him. Here's where Doyle's memory got hazy. He apparently lapsed into unconsciousness, and Wojtek called up Charlie Takot, asking him to come collect his deranged friend. It was possible, Doyle conceded, that Frykowski, or Kasanowski, had assaulted him after that. He admitted that he might have told his friend Mama Cass something to that effect. I was unconscious, he told Deemer. I wasn't sore the next day. Not there. But I was sore everywhere else. So he must have been so drugged out that he just doesn't remember the details, but I don't know. If you threaten to kill someone, and they assault you, and then you turn up dead, it seems like an avenue to investigate for sure. In another LAPD officer's account of that interview, Doyle puts it even more frankly. I was so freaked out on drugs, I wouldn't know if they'd assaulted me or not. It took a lot of asking around, but eventually I tracked down both Billy Doyle and Charles Taycott. As for the other two, I'd learned that Pick Dawson had died of a drug overdose in 1986, and Harrigan was nowhere to be found. Neither had given an interview before, and though they could be cagey, they were also eager to relive their underworld glories. Both were old men now, but they were still operators who acted as if they were at the height of their criminal powers. Impressively foul-mouthed, both of them threatened to have me killed at various points in our interviews, although I didn't take either seriously. In our first phone call, Taycott filled in some of the blanks from Doyle's story. He remembered driving over to pick up Doyle, who was passed out somewhere on the Cielo Drive property. His belt had been split, apparently with a knife. A friend who'd come along for the errand said, I think Wojtek effed him. They took Doyle, still unconscious, to Mama Cass's place in the Hollywood Hills. Taycott remembered thinking, if we don't take care of him, he's going to go back there and have a beef. I carried him out, laid him by a tree, went back to my car, and got about 20 feet of welded link chain. Okay, who's carrying around welded link chain in their car? That seems odd to me. Which I had in there for somebody else originally. I mean, maybe these are wise guys and they're doing stuff like this regularly. It seems funny to me. I put it around his ankle in a tree with a good padlock and snapped it all together. So I know he's not going to go anywhere. Cass was in the hospital at the time. She said, get the Polaroid, get the Polaroid. What would the pictures prove, though? That he's chained to a tree? Is that some kind of blackmail? I don't know. Doyle came to a few hours later, still very high and simmering with rage. I'm going to shoot that MFer, Takeo remembered him saying. And I said, no, we're leaving town. We're going to Jamaica. But first, you're going to get sober and you're going to be on this effing tree until you are. I asked Takeo, do you think Wojtek really did F Billy? Yeah, that's why Billy was so pissed at him, Takeo said. Wojtek would have been killed if I hadn't intervened. Would Billy have hired killers? I asked, thinking of Manson. No, he would have taken all the pleasure himself. Okay. In his interview with the police, Doyle had allowed that he was furious at Frykowski and his set. When I was chained to the tree, he said, they were the object of my rage, which was an unreasonable and unnatural rage. To calm him down, Doyle said, Taycoat had chained a sign to the tree that said, you are loved. What? So the dude is high. He's been assaulted. He's threatened to kill Frykowski. He's chained to a tree, but they put a sign there for him to see that says, you are loved, to keep him calm. Does anyone think that would work? Doyle was stuck there for more than a day. Oh my goodness. After that, Takeo told me the pair headed off to Jamaica, where apparently they were making a movie about marijuana. But no footage of this film has ever surfaced. Others have said the two were involved in a large narcotics deal. That makes more sense. On August 9th, while they were away, Manson goes up and kills those people, and everyone's looking for Doyle, Takeo said. Okay, so he was the most obvious perpetrator. He and Doyle were suspects within days. I picked up the phone one day, and the Toronto Star informed me that me and Billy were in the headlines. 2 wanted for murder. Well, I think being in Jamaica is a pretty solid alibi, if you can prove it, I guess. A couple of days later, back in the United States, I took a lie detector test Takeot told me. They knew I had nothing to do with it. Billy, too. He was in Jamaica with me. We were cleared, out of the country. You can't kill somebody long distance. True enough, but you could arrange for someone else to do the killing. Okay, that's true. Takeot adamantly denied that he and Billy Doyle knew Manson. They'd never even met the guy. Nor, he said, had they sold drugs to anyone staying at the Tate house. We were consultants, he said. We'd tell them if the drugs were okay or not. Oh, the benevolent drug dealers. Wow. Charlie Takeot wasn't exactly the picture of virtue. I wanted to find other people who'd known him, who could say if he'd known Manson. It wasn't hard. Seemingly everyone in town had partied with Takeot at some point. Corinne Calvet, a French actress who'd worked in Hollywood since the 40s, had one of the most alarming stories of them all. Calvet was as famous for her turbulent life as her film roles. Well, that's a lot of Hollywood starlets, right? I met Calvet at her beach-facing apartment in Santa Monica. Solemn and unsmiling, in heavy makeup, her gray hair swept back, she got right to the point. The only thing that I can tell you about this Manson, she said, is that Charlie Takeot brought him and the girls to a party at our house. 2 hours after they were there, I caught Manson taking a piss in my pool. I told Charlie Takeot to get them out of there, and they left. After the tragedy happened, the FBI came by and told me I was next on their list to be killed. Oh my gosh, because she kicked them out of her house for peeing in their pool. Man, yikes. That is not a group not to be trifled with, I guess you could say. When I expressed shock at this, her eyes narrowed. With genuine malice, she said, "Maybe you're new at this. When I tell you something, don't question it. I don't say it unless it's true." I don't know that I could work in dealing with these Hollywood types. So high on their own supply, I guess. I explained that Takeot had denied ever having met Manson or anyone in the family. "Maybe he has a good reason to say that," Calvet said, letting her words hang in the air. She was certain Charlie knew them. I pressed her again. She was sure that Takeot brought Manson and the girls to her party? Well, I would not put my hand in the fire saying that Charlie brought them over, but Charlie knew them. This is Charlie Takeot, not the other Charlie. I tried to get more out of Calvet, but the rest of the interview was frosty. When I asked her for specific dates or even years, she grew exasperated, throwing her hands up in disgust. "I do not know years, do not ask me." Before long, she had had it with me altogether. "I want you to leave now," she said. And I did. Again, these Hollywood types think they're just so dang special. Thinking I could eventually get Takeot to let his guard down, I began to visit him at the Santa Anita Convalescent Center in Temple City. His health was failing and he had trouble walking. I found him lying in bed naked, a sheet pulled just above his groin. He was bald with a silver mustache, bony arms, and a gravelly voice. I noticed a fading tattoo on his forearm. On the wall, he'd hung a photo of his granddaughter at her senior prom. Later, when he rose to get exercise using a walker, I saw how tall he was, 6'6" and rail thin. Although his faculties were waning, he was sharp. He still commanded enough authority to boss around the short orderly who assisted him. Takeot shared his room with another patient, and he seemed to resent the enfeebling atmosphere of the place. "Too much groaning around here," he said. So I offered to drive him to his favorite restaurant, Coco's, a California chain known for its pies. Oh, did you guys ever have that around? We had that in Arizona as well when I was a kid. Taking him out to lunch was an elaborate procedure. People from the rest home wheeled him out to my car, lifted him in, and put the wheelchair in the trunk. But once we were at Coco's, I had to lift him in the wheelchair myself, an intimate maneuver for 2 near strangers. Humiliated, he began to threaten me, albeit ineffectually. "Do you realize who you're dealing with?" he rasped as I attempted to hoist him out of my passenger seat. "I could have you hurt or killed." "Okay, do you want to go to Coco's and get some pie or not, dude?" In Coco's, with food in front of him, he calmed down a bit, and soon we were having a freewheeling, if combative, conversation about the murders and Hollywood in the 60s. Takeot had lived in Los Angeles since the mid-1950s, when he moved there from Mexico with his wife. He had 2 daughters, one of whom would later confirm a lot of her father's story. He was a drug dealer, she said, who operated on the fringes of the music and acting world. Although he would often get arrested, she said, nothing ever stuck. Something always took care of it for him. Again, we're going to see this with Manson. And the question is, why? Why? Takeout continued to deny ever having known Manson, and he bridled at the insinuation that he had anything to do with the crimes. The Tate murders, he went on, led to the most effed up investigation I've ever seen in my life. He had sued the LA Times for announcing him as a suspect. Any effort to implicate him, he said, was probably just the LAPD covering up for their bad police work. As he grew more comfortable, Takeout made an unexpected revelation. At the time of the murders, he worked for an intelligence agency. I wonder which one. He wouldn't say which, and reported to Hank Fine, a veteran of the Army's Military Intelligence Service. This had been a World War II era operation, so secret that it wasn't even acknowledged by the federal government until 1972. Fine, a Polish immigrant whose true name was Hirsch Matthias, oh my gosh, I'm going to butcher this, Warzaczahi, I'll put it up here, you guys can work out how to pronounce it, was an assassin who shot people for the government, Takeout explained. Thinking the old guy was fantasizing, I barely followed up on the revelation. Probably till later, but then it's going to become important. But he and later Billy Doyle would often reference Fine, only to refuse to answer any questions about him. When I looked into him, I learned neither man had been lying. Takeout also described his friend Doyle. They were still close. As a dangerous man, he'd kill you in an effing minute. Both of us are second-generation intelligence. Which, that seems to be true pretty often. Like, a lot of, CIA parents produce CIA children. I watched an interesting documentary on that pretty recently. I'll link it down below if you guys are interested. Pretty fascinating stuff, though. I don't know if you guys are interested in the CIA. I totally am. I hope so, because that's the whole point of this book. Don't write this stuff, he implored me. You'll get killed. These are very dangerous men. They'll find you and kill you. That was a warning I'd hear a lot from various parties over the years. Takeout reminded me that Bugliosi, when he wrote Helter Skelter, had given pseudonyms to him and his friends, and not just for the sake of politeness. He was afraid American intelligence would kill him if he exposed us. He added that Bugliosi was an a-hole who never interviewed him or Billy. Vincent Bugliosi knows to keep his mouth shut. I'd have got him killed. I didn't tell him that. I didn't have to. I tried to get Takeout on the subject of Frykowski, who was to my mind the victim with the shadiest cast of characters around him. Frykowski was on drugs all the time, Takeout said, contradicting what he told me on the phone. He said that Frykowski had sold MDA, but only to close friends. I didn't take Takeout out again, but I kept calling and visiting him. I found him evasive or senile or a little of both. And the more I asked around about him, the more he seemed to vanish into the mist of the 60s. Some people told me with certainty that Takeout had been an assassin for the CIA, that he was a gun freak and an incredible marksman. In his 2006 autobiography since then, How I Survived Everything and Lived to Tell About It, the musician David Crosby identified Takeout as a soldier of fortune who taught him how to shoot a gun. Others said that he was an ex-Marine who'd served in Korea and used to show off his impressive knife-throwing skills. I heard that he grew pot in Arizona, that he was a child molester. Sorry, some words you can't use on here, guys. That he was a coke smuggler, and that he was an uncredited screenwriter, and that his intelligence ties were all fictitious. And the strange thing was, none of this was entirely implausible. Okay, so is he an assassin for the CIA? Then why would him being an intelligence agent be why would that be fictitious? I don't know. About the only thing everyone could agree on was that Takeout had been involved in a lot of schemes, that he'd been a drug dealer, and even more, a drug user. When I looked into Hank Fine, the MIS guy, the military intelligence guy, Takeout had said he'd reported to, I learned that like everything Takeout said, there was at least a kernel of truth to it. Fine, who'd been a movie PR man from the 1940s until his death in 1975, had been in the Office of Strategic Services, otherwise known as the OSS, the counterintelligence agency that oversaw the military intelligence system, and it evolved into the CIA. So OSS becomes the CIA after World War II. His work often seemed to combine Hollywood and spycraft. Eddie Albert, the star of the 60s sitcom Green Acres, told me that Fine had sent him on undercover missions to Mexico during the war. From his sailboat, the actor had photographed German landing sites and military training grounds. That's interesting. Though I found no proof, the consensus among Fine's associates was that he'd continued working in espionage operations through the 60s. His only child, Shayla, told me that his public relations gig was a cover. And yes, she said, Takeout had reported to her father. What kind of work were they doing? She never knew, except that it was classified. Whenever I saw Takeout, I returned to the subject of Fine. Don't mention that name anywhere, he barked, seeming genuinely disturbed. When I asked why not, he said, none of your effing business. You're effing with the wrong people. Or was I effing with lowlifes who wanted to present an illusion of importance? I really couldn't say, and when I was finally able to talk to Billy Doyle, things didn't get any clearer. Takeout gave me Doyle's number. He's a retired old man just like me, he said, and he may not want to talk too much. Don't push him if he doesn't. But Doyle liked an audience just as he had in 1969. I called him often at his home in Toronto, and he talked for hours, sometimes rambling at such length that I would turn off my recorder to save tape. Just when he was trying my patience, he'd say something provocative, and I'd have to switch the recorder back on and try to get him to repeat it. He had a short temper, and when he exploded, usually out of nowhere, it could be hard to calm him down. One time, when he didn't like my line of questioning, he told me, I was shooting at targets 1,000 yards yesterday, implying that I could soon be one of them. Another time, when I tried to get some specifics about Hank Fine, Doyle yelled, go in the bathroom, swallow the gun, and pull the trigger. These guys are really volatile, aren't they? When he wasn't angry, he sometimes got a kick out of teasing me. He would make a major revelation and then retract it the next time we spoke. I got the sense that he sometimes trusted me enough to tell the truth, only to realize later that he shouldn't have done that. Doyle believed that Polanski and Frykowski were Polish spies. See, another spy angle. The former subverting American democracy with his decadent films. Now, there's a lot of CIA involvement in Hollywood and films and the media. If you look up Project Mockingbird, if you want something pretty awful, he was sure that Polanski had something to do with the killings. It went both ways. I'd heard that Polanski thought Doyle had something to do with the killings. He denied that he'd ever been a drug dealer. I read him passages from the police report in which he'd confessed to, even bragged about having vast amounts of cocaine. But even after that, he denied it to me. He wouldn't be stupid enough to carry 2 pounds of coke on a plane, he said. When I asked him about MDA, the drug that he and Wojtek had allegedly bought in large quantities, he said he'd never even heard of it. Convenient. He relented when I read him some quotes from the transcript. Okay, fine, he'd taken it. I brought up his and Takeout's alibi for the night of the murders. They'd been in Jamaica, you'll recall, filming a pot movie. Doyle admitted that the movie was a ruse. He and Takeout had really been doing intelligence work there. So, this intelligence angle's getting interesting, I hope, for you guys. He said, as part of some effort to keep Cuba out of Jamaica. That's interesting. There's a lot around Cuba in that time that I don't understand the ins and outs of. Dead white men will pull your tongue out if I tell you this shit, he said. You have to understand that the government doesn't want to have any exposure on the Jamaican thing. There never was a Jamaican thing. They don't want you to know about it. When I asked why, he said, how the F do I know? I'm a Canadian citizen. I went with Charles on an adventure. I thought we were going to do a movie. But that's not what you really went there for, and you knew it. That's right. It's an exchange that illustrates how cryptic Doyle could be and how he reveled in it. I had to ask about the story behind his alleged assault. He said that it never happened either. Charles was spreading the assault story to have fun at my expense, he explained. Even my mom and dad asked if I was assaulted. And yet he betrayed the same uncertainty he'd shown to the cops so many decades ago, telling me that he had a friend take photos of him naked so that he could examine his rear end. Okay, first of all, that's gross. Second of all, is that what Mama Cass was saying with the take the Polaroid? You're taking pictures of his lower region to prove that he'd been assaulted? That's interesting and gross. But is it something that would cause someone to murder a bunch of people? I don't know. I mean, certainly not. I think they proved who did it and that it wasn't these guys. But I think the point he's trying to make is that there were intelligence agents around this, the Hollywood set at that time. And, the Manson and his family were much more, involved with people that, or may or may not have been involved with people. The guy said he didn't know him, but that actress said, yes, he absolutely did. So there's a lot of, lying and scheming, which, with criminals, what do you expect? But I think it's interesting that Bugliosi left it out of Helter Skelter, which again was the official story of the Manson murders. But we're going to keep going and we're going to find out that probably a lot of it was true or a lot was left out of that. And Bugliosi was probably not the best guy around. All right, guys, thanks for sticking around. I will see you in the next one. All right, take care. Bye.